Welcome to the Muscles and Veggies podcast. Nutrition, health, fitness, lifestyle, all perfectly packaged into a bite-sized podcast to educate and motivate you to stay on your fitness journey. What are we talking about today? Today, we are talking about the 4 most inflammatory foods that I advocate all my clients get off of. They remove, they eliminate. So a few weeks ago, we did an episode. It was basically the 5 top things I recommend to any client who starts on a weight loss journey or starts a healthy lifestyle in coaching with me. And I decided to put that out to the public. If anyone benefited from it, great. But the 5 most inflammatory things, and one of the things that we talked about, I wanted to do a whole show on, and that is inflammatory foods. Now, if we're going to talk about inflammatory foods, we have to talk about what is inflammation. Inflammation in its raw form, you could think of it like spraining an ankle. What happens when you roll your ankle, twist your ankle? Fluids swell up that area and they're driven to that area. That is what's called acute inflammation. And we need that. It's beneficial. It actually, in an injury type situation, it's beneficial. But what is systemic inflammation? Well, you could think about it like this. It's inflammation of our entire circulatory system or our blood system. And remember, why is blood the source of life? Because it is basically the carrying vessels, our blood vessels. They carry through it all of our vitamins and nutrients and minerals and all these things that the cells need to thrive off of. That is the highway of transport, right? So when we have inflammation systemically, we have to know what's driving systemic or circulatory inflammation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of times it's the things we're putting in our body. Now, granted, chronic stress and cortisol can drive up inflammation despite what we eat. So if you're really stressed out, yes, that can drive systemic or chronic inflammation. But today we're going to focus on the 4 foods that I advocate my clients eliminate from their nutrition plan to optimize inflammation. Number 4, going down to number 1. Number 4 is inflammatory seed oils. Omega-6 fatty acids, also referred to as refined trans fats. These are things like vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, safflower oil. You could go on, and I'll tell you which oils I recommend at the end of this. But these are highly inflammatory, especially to the blood and to the heart. Now, they're attributed to inflame arterial walls, which causes atherosclerosis or arterial hardening of the arteries. High blood pressure, which is hardening of the arteries. It's associated with stroke, heart attack, heart disease. And you know what? These inflammatory oils are in so much of our food. To give you an idea, vegetable oil is made from corn oil, and a lot of our frying oils are soybean oils. This is what's used in restaurant a lot. And 90% of the country's main 2 crops, you know what it is? Corn and soy. And that's because it's extremely cheap to make these 2 oils. And so big food companies, I won't say who, but most of them use either vegetable oil, canola oil, or soybean oil to preserve their foods. They put trans fats into their foods to help preserve them. Now, what is a preservative? Really quick, I'm going to go on a tangent about what is a preservative. A preservative is a food additive that helps that food not spoil so that it can sit in a package for years on end, and it has an expiration date 2 or 3 years down the road. But even past that expiration date, is that food molding? 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's still being preserved past the expiration date. So what is the bacterial process that breaks down food? Well, I just answered it. It's bacterial. You set an apple on a shelf next to a packaged Twinkie. The apple is completely nasty in a matter of months, and the Twinkie is still sitting there 7 years later. That is because of the preservatives that's in the food. What do you think that does to the bacteria that's inside of you? We have estimated 100 trillion active bacteria in our body at any given time. That's 10 times more of them than there is our human cells. So a preservative has the ability to wreck our microbiome, not just in our gut, but all over. And that's also caused by systemic inflammation. So in talking about preservative like trans fats and these oils, we have to learn how to read labels and how to stay away from these things. And this may be a bummer to a lot of people, because when you start reading labels, you find out these preservative oils are in everything because they're such a cheap preservative for processed food companies to use. So what are the oils that I do recommend? Well, stick with avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil. These are probably my top 3 cooking oils if I do actually cook some veggies in some oils or something like that. You could use also, well, you could use it in baking, things like that. These are the 3 oils that I do use: avocado, coconut, and olive oil. So let's move on to number 3, dairy. And this is not a shocker to a lot of people. Constantly I hear people talk about they know that they should stay away from dairy, but it's hard and yada yada. Well, a lot of people know they have an allergy to dairy, and that's mostly because 80% of people have been found to not carry the enzyme lactase, which is what digests lactose, which is what people have when they can digest lactose. They don't have lactose intolerance like the people who don't have lactase. So we also can't talk about dairy without mentioning casein protein. There's whey protein and there's casein protein. The casein protein actually is highly addictive, but it's also very detrimental to the digestive tract. It's touted for being a slow digesting protein. Well, why is it slow digesting? It's slow digesting because it's hard to digest. So casein protein is found to be very inflammatory. And why is it addictive? Well, we have to talk about casomorphines. These are opiate-like compounds that are inside of dairy. You can look this up. I'm not making this up. These are opiate-like compounds that are found in dairy that make dairy highly addictive. So if you're someone who's like, I can't do without my cheese, I can't do without this, or my yogurt or whatever, that could be because you have an addiction to these casomorphines, these opiate-like compounds in dairy. Now, we also can't talk about inflammation without talking about one of the biggest culprits, which is my number 2, gluten. Gluten sensitivity has been on the rise over the last 20 years. Man, we were kids in the 1980s, 1990s. Nobody had gluten sensitivity. Unless you were celiac, it wasn't even heard of. So now some people will argue that gluten is a marketing hype and it's a fad, right? Well, let me share this with you. Studies show that 80% of people have a negative immune response to gluten. That means their immune system negatively reacts every time that gluten enters into their system. It's associated with digestive problems, autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's thyroiditis or rheumatoid arthritis, and any of these itises, because anything with an itis on the end of it is inflammation. Pancreatitis, arthritis, these are inflammations, right? So also, this is a big one, brain fog and lethargy. This is how I found that I had a gluten sensitivity. Every time I ate pizza or pasta or bread or anything, man, I was so tired and my brain fog was horrible. So when I cut this out for 30 days, it was really easy to see that I had more energy, more clarity, especially in the afternoon. I didn't have that afternoon crash. There was a lot of reasons why I knew I was onto something. So here's a huge one that not a lot of people talk about, but this was actually listed as the number 1 symptom of gluten sensitivity is anxiety and depression. And aren't those at all-time highs right now? Not just because of what's going on in the world, but social media and in general. Anxiety and depression. If you have anxiety and depression and you haven't tried going gluten-free, I highly advocate you give it a shot for 30 days, enter it back in and see how you feel. Your body will tell you if you're aware whether it's reacting to something or not, but it has to go for a period of time without it so that you can enter it back in and really see the night and day difference in it. So here's the big kicker for me is water weight. When I cut gluten and dairy both out of my nutrition, I had been struggling to try to see my abs. I was a lean, muscular guy, but I never had abs. So this is a vain attempt, I know, don't judge me, but I wanted to see my abs, right? Who doesn't? Come on. And anyways, I cut out gluten and dairy. Within a matter of 2 weeks, I had dropped 8 to 10 pounds of water weight. And you can look this up. This is a common occurrence between a lot of people going gluten and dairy free, that their inflammation is so much lower that they drop water weight. Imagine deflating your ankle when it swells up with water after you sprained it. That would be a lot of water that dropped off that ankle, right? Well, imagine deflating your whole body if you are systematically inflamed. So that is what I'm trying to get my clients to do, is to decrease systemic overall inflammation throughout the body. And if you do so, your hormones are elevated, your immune system's elevated, your metabolism is elevated. It's much more likely that you're going to put on muscle, and it's much more likely you're going to burn more fat. And the best thing about it is you're going to have more energy. So those are my top 3. Finally, we have the last one. Number 1 thing to remove to decrease inflammation. Come on, folks. You know it's sugar. You know it's sugar. Refined added sugars. Man, this is crazy. 56 different names on food labels that they try to hoodwink people into thinking that it's not sugar. 56 different names for sugar. It's addictive. It's proven more addictive than cocaine or heroin in mice. It induces diabetes. It raises inflammation. It causes hormone problems. Added refined sugars is what we're talking about. So anywhere and everywhere you can decrease added refined sugars. Probably the number 1 in the US American diet is soft drinks and sugary drinks and tea and Gatorade and all these things that have added sugars to them. Decreasing those. I've seen a guy who wanted to lose weight. He didn't change a thing. He kept eating processed foods. He kept eating fast food. All he did was cut out soft drinks and Coke and pop and all these things. Dropped 50 pounds in like a matter of 3 months just from eliminating the added refined sugars in just Coke and Pepsi and the stuff that he was drinking. So sugar in all of its forms, super addictive. You combine that with gluten and dairy and inflammatory seed oils, and you have a recipe for massive inflammation, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, all these things that we saw during the last year of this virus. All these people that were the most susceptible were those who had all these problems. And look, they were likely eating the standard American diet in the US, which is full of refined sugars, wheat, gluten, dairy, and inflammatory seed oils. So if we can remove these 4 foods, and don't even try to do it all at once. If you can do that, you have the willpower to do that, do it. I mean, you will benefit. You will feel like a brand new person after a week or 2. But I'm not saying that every client has to do that. I advocate we replace things that we remove with healthy options. So just trying to have a smoothie every morning, and then just trying to have a big salad with lunch with some fruit and maybe a piece of protein, and then having a big roasted dinner with roasted or sauteed veggies and a nice cut of wild-caught, grass-fed, free-range, good source of meat. Maybe a sweet potato or some rice or some quinoa. Look, folks, this is easier than we make it out to be. It is not that complicated. But what we do have to avoid is processed, packaged, inflammatory foods like we talked about today. If you like this podcast, if you like what you're hearing, please share it with someone. Please leave me a review. Please hit the like button, subscribe, all those things, right? If you're getting something out of this, show me some love. If you like really good supplements, you can buy the same supplements that I use. And not just that I use, but that the US Olympic team uses, the Golden State Warrior basketball team uses. This is Thorne Supplements, THORNE, thorne.com/u/muscles. There's a discount for anyone who wants a discount on Thorne supplements and free shipping. Check it out. They have the best supplements in the game, or why would the USA Olympic teams use them consistently year after year in their training? Also, musclesandveggies.com if you want to learn more about me and what I do. This is Zach, your host of the Muscles and Veggies Fitness Podcast, hoping that you have a wonderful day.